to welcome you to the Linder Family Commons at George Washington University, and happy Diwali. I'm sure folks are not here if they're celebrating Diwali, but nonetheless, happy Diwali. My name is Ryan McElveen, and I'm the Managing Director here at the U.S. China Education Trust. Just as a brief background about us, we are here to promote U.S.-China relations through educational exchange for next-generation leaders. This event tonight is part of our China Connection series, which is a monthly event series that helps provide insight into the work of professionals in the field, as well as to offer insights into current events in the U.S.-China relations space. And I'm pleased also to be introducing tonight one of our co-sponsors for this event, who is Sean Stein of the U.S. China Business Council. Sean is the president of the U.S. China Business Council, and he most recently served as the board chair of the American Chamber of Commerce in China, and is the chair emeritus of the American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai. He previously served for nearly 3 decades as a U.S. diplomat, including as consul general in Shenyang and Shanghai. Sean, over to you.
It is really great to see people here and such great turnout, to see that there's an interest in actually building a career in U.S. China. As Ryan said, I'm Sean Stein from U.S. China Business Council, and actually I'm here for one reason only. And that reason is most recently AmCham, based in China with the AmChams, and so we had almost all of the American companies were our members. Now I'm at USCBC, and the large companies that do business with China are our members. And that includes law firms like the firm that I came from. It includes consulting firms. It includes banks. It includes manufacturers. And so I've got a pretty good window into the market. And so the one thing that I'm here to do is to say that there is an absolute market for people with China expertise that understand the context, the history, the culture, how business is done, and how to operate in that sort of cross-cultural environment. And in particular, people who can bridge that gap between business and government on the China side, or between headquarters and the local affiliate in China, and everything in between. So all that is to say, what you're doing is great. Listen to the wonderful advice you're going to get from these people, because the opportunities are still there. But they've changed. When I went to China a long time ago, I went to China with no China experience. They told me I was going to go to a place called Chengdu. And when they told me that, I remember, is that Tajikistan? Is that Kazakhstan? And I had no idea. And then the person who was telling me I should go to China was like, it's not as developed as Shanghai, but it's a really great place. I was like, oh, it's China. And that's what it took for me to go to Chengdu a long time ago. But now what it takes is a little bit different. Now it requires real skills, real expertise, maybe time in country, but it requires a harder background. But the jobs are still there. Our companies come to us constantly asking for us to make recommendations. And the types of things that these people have done are great paths to get to a wonderful China career, and the jobs are there. Thank you. Good luck.
Well, thank you again, Sean, for that introduction, and to the U.S. China Business Council for co-sponsoring with us tonight. I do also want to recognize the young professionals in foreign policy and the Black China Caucus, as well as the U.S. China Business Council for co-sponsoring this event with us tonight. And I know we have representatives from those organizations on the panel tonight, so I welcome them to share their insights and perspectives on those organizations as well as part of their remarks. But I would begin tonight by just setting the scene a little bit and say that it's very rare that we have the opportunity to sit down with young professionals in foreign policy and speak about their careers. Usually this and other stages is reserved for those who have been around for, frankly, a pretty long time and have oftentimes lost touch what it is like to seek jobs in this increasingly competitive, and at least at this moment, it seems to be shrinking field. Not tonight. Tonight, we'll present you with several of this field's most impressive and inspiring young professionals who will share their stories, provide guidance, and also hopefully provide some critiques of a field that is very hierarchical, not always the most representative, and doesn't always do the best to nurture its youth. So with that, we do have with us, again, a very impressive panel, all of whose bios you can find on our website. They're very long. Very extensive, very impressive. I'm not going to read them. So we have at the far end, Rachael Burton, who is a senior policy analyst on the Security and Foreign Affairs team at the U.S. China Economic and Security Review Commission. Next, we have Erin Chan, who is a senior associate at the Asia Group. Next, we have Jie Gao, who is a research associate on foreign policy and national security at the Asia Society Policy Institute's Center for China Analysis. Next, we have Kyle Hutzler, who serves as the executive director of Asia Pacific Policy and Strategic Competitiveness at JPMorgan Chase. And finally, we have Greyson Mann, who is a senior manager of government affairs at the U.S. China Business Council. So I'll begin tonight, and since time is short, we're going to just launch into questions by asking each of you a question about your specific career and background. So we're going to begin with Rachael on this one. So Rachael, you've had a fascinating career that's taken you from a rural village in Yunnan to the halls of the U.S. Department of Defense. What has led you down the road from people to mill, and what lessons have you carried with you?
And thank you for having me here. It's nice to be back in my alma mater, and it's funny that you ask about like rural China today, because like the road to China started at GW. There was a GW alum who did a program called for China, was a fellow there, and as a senior in college, I was kind of thinking through like looking for jobs, either staying here in DC and maybe finding, if I could, like a program assistant job at a think tank somewhere, or really just like casting a wide net. And so when I saw Teach for China, at first I was like, I want to spend 2 years teaching, and everyone in my family thought I was crazy. They're like, you went to GW to study international relations. Like, why are you going to go teach for 2 years? But I think for me, as someone coming out of college, it was important to, one, I just couldn't believe at the time, which I will date myself, it was 2013. I couldn't believe that the Chinese government was going to allow foreigners to be in rural schools. I was in Laoying Middle School, which is outside of Baoshan City in Yunnan, about like 30 kilometers away. And I was the only foreigner there for my first year. I had another foreigner there my second year. I got to really build cohort with my Chinese fellows. To this day, Teach for China exists. It's 17 years old. They've done incredible work building, helping the education of rural students all over China. They just no longer have a foreign fellows program. But I think at the time, it was important to me that this was a time not really to like focus on like U.S. China relations writ large, but really just to build out some of like my hard skills. You know, I think when you're a teacher, I always say it was the hardest job I've ever had. I taught English to a class size of an average of 60 middle school students aged 11 to 14. And being a teacher requires you to be tactile, requires you to think on your feet, to innovate. You're solving problems day in and day out. And I really liked that experience. And of course, I think just having a principal be like, hey, tomorrow, can you give a speech in front of like all of, you know, whoever Chinese on something, and you can't say no to the principal. And so I think just being 20, 21 years old and being thrusted into that like professional environment gave me a lot of those skill sets. And it really was important to me to be able to do a job that had impact, that had mission and really mattered. And that's what drove me to want to teach in China. It was 2 years long. I wasn't just there for one semester. And I really had a lot of agency as a Fuban Juren, as someone who had really hopefully a positive impact on these students' lives for those 2 years. But I think how do I get from like rural China back to DC was really a big question. And I think a lot of it goes back to being really open to different industries. Like I didn't have a defense background to begin with. I really focused on kind of China foreign policy issues. I was on like really social and political issues. And I didn't do much on China's military until I was more of a young professional. And it really was just being open to ideas, talking to a lot of folks. I think behind the scenes, it started with an internship that I had at the Carnegie Tsinghua Center in Beijing between my 2 years teaching, and that connected me with a think tank here in DC, really Arlington, called the Project 2049 Institute, now the Institute for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs, I think. They just rebranded. And it was through this organization that I took all of my hard skills I learned teaching and my language skills, be able to apply it to a plethora of different items. I think a lot of the program management that I did there, they really were able to encourage me to build out my professional development, not just doing like research and analysis, but I really was interested in figuring out like what are the strategic issues that the organization should be like working on, and also learning from the mentors that we had at the Project 249 Institute, through Mark Stokes and Randy Shriver, who really are just like hallmarks of U.S. China relations over the last 20, 30 years. And so being open to learn from others, to be able to ask questions and say, hey, I don't know anything about the PLA, like can you teach me? I want to work on a project that looks at the PLA from like an organization and structure standpoint, like who can I talk to? Being really open to those types of questions have opened a lot of other doors, and not kept me, I think, so siloed maybe on one industry or one maybe subsect of U.S. China relations writ large. Positive.
Well, great. Thank you, Rachel. And here at USCET, we're big fans of Yunnan. We've done a lot of programming there. I will say for the past 2 summers, I've taken students to Yunnan, and one of them is in the audience tonight. So anyway, we're proud of our Yunnan ties here. So Aaron, next to you. You've had a career that has touched on many areas of focus, from environment to political economy to investment. Most interesting to me is your experience in cybersecurity. As your career has progressed, how have you been able to so nimbly develop expertise in this wider range of areas? And what advice do you have for the rest of us on becoming a subject matter expert on so many things?
Yeah, hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I think I'll start with the second half of that question first, which my advice is don't do what I did, which is trying to build the plane as you're flying it through a hurricane. I thought when I finished undergrad that I wanted to do international finance, so I had done investor relations, institutional investment, financial consulting, strategic planning, and then come to find out almost 3 years later that I absolutely did not want to do that, and I wanted to pivot to foreign policy. So rule number one is, I think those people who are here in the room right now, you are miles ahead of where I was when I was finishing college. You have a North Star, you have a goal that you want to go to, which is already a great place to start. Insofar as touching on and preparing myself for the next step of my career trajectory at every stage, I think it comes from a sense of me personally feeling that I was behind the ball in terms of when I got to DC, started my actually grad school here at GW as well, and going through COVID, a year and a half of COVID to finish, the job market was bleak. People were not hiring for a lot of positions. And so I really put myself to task of saying, what will help me build a cohesive story as I'm trying to change industries, as I'm trying to retool my career trajectory, and kind of surveying the field, what I was interested in, but also where I saw the field going in the future. And so part of that was helped by, I was working on the House for my House rep, Susie Lee. And during that time, I learned everything that I could about press, about comms, about research, legislation, memo writing, everything that I could do, get my hands on, I volunteered for. And when I finally moved back to the Senate to work for Tammy Duckworth, I was already in a position of, I have this job mastered because I've done it before. And so it really allowed me to stabilize and have a good platform to say, okay, where do I go from here? Where do I see myself? Where do I see myself moving towards in terms of future goals, in terms of what topics that I wanted to see, in terms of what areas I wanted to work for. So that led to me reaching out to the Biden-Harris administration and seeing what positions were available for wanting to make an even bigger impact than I was at the Senate in the legislative office, and working very closely with mentors, with colleagues to say, okay, here's kind of where the field is. You can work in, my background is in climate and political economy. That's what I did here at GW. And so preparing myself at every step of the way, and really kind of interrogating the next seat, as it's called, right? And really investigating, what is it about this position that I can see myself in the future? What does it really take to get there? What skills are they looking for? And just beyond that, thinking about what's the next step after that. And I think I was really spurred by my sense of being behind the ball and to try to have that momentum upwards. And so I really put myself to task in order to say, okay, I'm in this position. What's the next step? How do I prepare myself? And so that at every stage of my career journey, so when I was moving between the Biden-Harris administration from the FEMA Administrator's Office to serve as the National Cyber Director's legislative advisor. That was an intentional of like, where do I see myself exploring, expanding, and moving to next? So I would say always be thoughtful and intentional with your outreach, with your job. Always do your job well, but give yourself time to volunteer for other projects that might interest you, expand your skills, expand your network. That would be my broad takeaway.
That's great. That's great. Thank you, Aaron. So next to Jie Gao. So there are students from China in the audience here today, and you certainly provide a model example of coming to America, studying at 2 prestigious universities, and landing a job at a premier think tank, and then moving on to Asia Society. That's a joke. Jie and I worked at Brookings together for a few years ago. So what challenges did you face along the way, and how did you overcome them?
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for inviting me to this panel. So I would have to say first that the challenges I faced back in the last administration is totally different from what you guys are living with right now. So, I was fortunate that Asia Society sponsored my H-1B visa, and I didn't have to go through the lottery or pay the 10K fee. So, so I totally feel how difficult the situation is for a lot of my international fellows here. But I also have to say, like, when I applied for my first full-time job, I didn't hear back from a lot of companies either. And for those that did reach out to me to move forward for the next steps, it's usually because I reached out to somebody in the company and try to do coffee chats, share more.
Yeah, so I know like coffee chats is not really a common thing back in China, but here in DC it's really integrated into the professional culture. So please don't be shy if you don't feel comfortable talking to strangers. I mean, it's a great chance for you to build connection with people and share your stories. So that will give them more incentives to actually flag your resume to HR. Yeah, because I did have this conversation with someone on LinkedIn who just randomly linked with me and then dropped the resume saying, can you refer me? I was like, do I know you or something? So yeah, please at least try to share more about yourself through words or through conversations. Like, don't be like, here's my resume, refer me, okay? I would say like actually one of the biggest challenges I am facing right now is also like job security because the climate is not that good overall. So I would say my strategy is try to create something that has the value outlast the like a single grant. So for example, one of the projects I worked on very early on is called Taiwan Policy Database, which is a interactive website I helped design. But when I first joined the team, it was only like a handful of events, and then they're trying to do like a simple scrolling down type of timeline. But I see the chance to kind of like expand the scope and then make it more like a data set that can review patterns instead of just like a timeline. So I added more than 300 new entries to the database, and I help kind of figure out the visualization to make the development of Taiwan straits between like U.S. mainland and also Taiwan perspectives on the website. And I think even though we really like exhausted the original scope of external fund very kind of like quickly, our director still wanted to invest in this product. And I think that's kind of like a sign that he sees the additional value I add to this project. And also like another newsletter I pitched to my supervisor, which is called like PLA Watch. Well, I feel lucky that I pitched that because we were waiting for the new government grant. And actually like ended up we probably never gonna get it. So at least I keep myself busy and then keep showing the Asian society that I can provide value to our research. So I would say like, this happened the same during the interviews. I would suggest you to look at what the products are going on at the moment and see what value you can add to them. And also don't get comfortable when you get the job, like you never know. So yeah, I'll pause it here.
Very good advice for this challenging time. Thanks, Jie. Kyle, so you have built a very impressive career through stints at the International Trade Commission, McKinsey, and now at JPMorgan. But I first want to ask about your time as a member of the inaugural class of the Schwarzman Scholars. My understanding is that the application process this year was extremely competitive, as it has always been. But can you tell us about how that experience has shaped your career trajectory? Do you recommend the program to others? And would you do it again?
Wholeheartedly recommend it, and not just because I had the good fortune of meeting my wife in the program, with whom we have the first Schwarzman baby together, and we're looking forward to all going back, 10 cohorts going back to Beijing in April, and so very excited for that. I think it's just an incredible platform and privilege. You think incredible institutions like GW open doors, just wait until you're in China and you tell somebody that you're doing something at Tsinghua in terms of the respect and opportunity that just inherently affords you. I would say what's been incredibly heartening about watching the program evolve over the past 10 years has been the way that they have taken all of the feedback that we gave as the guinea pigs in year one, and over time have really incorporated that into a program that is even stronger and more compelling when I first decided to apply. What's been incredible, particularly in DC, I can't tell you, when you're in the first cohort, there are no alumni. You are the ones who will soon become the alumni, and it's just been incredible now that I'm in this role with JPMorgan. I can't tell you how often I find myself calling another Schwarzman scholar and saying, can my boss talk to your boss? And it's just that network that didn't exist 10 years ago does, already seeing it deliver on a daily basis, value for me. And I would say one other thing that's been important to recognize about the Schwarzman program, and I think that proves Steve's initial hypothesis correct, was his vision was what the world needs just as much as China specialists. It's going to need folks for whom China is a minor. And so the program, I think, very intentionally tries to bring folks together who are going to be leaders in all sorts of different fields, public, private, social sector, host of industries, for whom that baseline understanding of China is going to be an enabler and very helpful, but not necessarily the primary focus of their career. And I think, to Sean's point of there is growth, I certainly see that growth at the intersections, right, of China, X, whatever you choose to be.
Well, that's a ringing. Thank you, Kyle. So, Greyson, next to you. And by the way, I know Greyson has also done the Princeton and Asia program, so we're eager to hear about that as well. But of these panelists, your career is probably the most varied in terms of sectors, and that's in a good way. You've done work in tech, education, and corporate sectors. Can you share how your China background has advantaged you or not in each of those various fields along the way?
Thanks, Ryan, and thanks everybody in the room tonight and online for joining. This is a really important conversation, as we know how important the U.S. China relationship is. So I'd say, the reason there's some variance is there will be inflection points throughout your career that are out of your control. For instance, when I worked for the Obama administration, we all thought we were going to get promoted when and if Hillary won, and we all know how that happened. So, that is inflection point that's out of your control, that, things will change the direction of your career and what work you do. Other things that, we work on at the U.S. China Business Council, the important policies that are being made on both sides will affect businesses and the work that you do. So, for instance, I was a part of a startup that built a school in DC and in China. And with that, there was a policy when we began the school that China input, where a foreign education organization could no longer incur revenue. So while we were expecting 100 million in revenue in China, it went down to zero. So you can imagine that I'm no longer with that business because it no longer exists. So with that, I'll say along the lines, as you mentioned, how has China and the Chinese language been a part of it? I'd say sincerity is an important part no matter what you do. Jie hit on that as well. She hit on some of the changes that happen in this too. But sincerity is going to be important. And I'd say while China can be a minor, if you're really going to pursue that major, learning the language shows the interest and the care and will allow you to build bridges. So I would always encourage language education as a part of U.S. China education, but, again, not always required. And that's why I ended up getting the Princeton in Asia job. When I worked for Princeton Asia, it was my first job out of undergrad, going back 11 years ago in 2014, where I worked at YK Pao School, a school in Shanghai, where I was able to teach English there, but also teach Chinese to the foreign teachers there. And, that sincerity of being able to build bridges has been sort of the main theme, I'd say. So with that, the person who had the job before me in Princeton in Asia didn't know Chinese and struggled living in China. Not to say that you can't live in China if you don't speak Chinese. But with that, they were like, Greyson, we want you to go there. And that job actually led to many future jobs. So for instance, when I had the opportunity to work for the U.S. Department of Education, some of the inflection points, I'd say there were actually positive inflection points about 11 years ago. I know there will be positive inflection points in the relationship going forward too, but I was able to be a part of the Secretary of Education, going to the school that I used to work at, engaging with some of my students, including some of the bad students too. I found that interesting. I was like, oh, he met the Secretary of Education while he was there. Okay, great. I don't know if that student could even be online tonight, because I'm sure he's getting like a master's or a PhD at some great school. But anyways, I would say being able to be sincere with what you do, being able to go with some of the changes, some of the punches that will come your way, are going to be a part of that. And again, language and engaging with folks in a sincere way is going to be important. So I'd say, continue to push through some of the challenges that may come your way, whether it's a change in politics or whether it's just business is business and down to the numbers. You have to keep pushing through. And I'll even sort of end by a thought of really thinking about, defining, and I think this goes back to some of what we heard from Aaron, defining what you want your purpose to be within this field, being focused. If you are really interested in education, finding that teaching job is going to be really important. Looking for it too, understanding that there may be more limited opportunities there. But if you're really passionate about something within the field, continue to learn more about it. Folks have talked about networking and who you're talking to. Those sincere relationships are important. I'll even sort of share one other thing, which it's interesting to connect the dots on now, many years later. How I even got my job in the Obama administration is kind of funny. I had a choice one night to go to a networking reception for the young professionals in foreign policy, or meeting up with a friend of mine who 10 minutes before I was going to go to that networking event said, I want to have dinner with you. He happened to be Michelle Obama's chief of staff at the time. So in making that decision, I had already RSVP'd for YPFP. I was really sad to not go, but it was in building that close relationship with somebody that got my resume in the door. And I'll even say, your resume is really important. I don't know how my resume got me a job back then, and I'll tell you why. It was a 4-page resume, 2 pages in English, just in Chinese. And that was actually why I got the job, because they said we thought it was really impressive that you had your resume in Chinese as well as English. Not sure how well that would work nowadays, considering it. Say, who is he? Why is this in Chinese? But back then, who really didn't know much about China, thought it was really impressive to have a bilingual resume. So again, not recommending that nowadays. You have to talk to folks specifically in the field or the company you're looking at. But that's sort of how it all came together.
Ryan, could I have a two-finger? You mentioned inflection point, and I thought it was something I've been thinking about coming into this panel, which is when we were all starting our careers, China was not the number one focus of US foreign policy at the time. Like it was kind of this, maybe asterisk, if you were studying the field, it was very important and it was this behemoth within the region itself, and the region is complicated, but it wasn't the most important conversation that Washington, D.C. or the Beltway was happening. And so I think if there is any anxieties that is being felt today of either the field or the industry or jobs, shrinking, as Ryan said, I also think that these issues are cyclical. The issues that we're facing today are same issues that our mentors faced 20, 30 years ago. And so China was not the center of the issues in 2009, and they also weren't the center of issues necessarily in like the early 1990s either. And so don't be discouraged, I would say, by a feeling if you do that US and China is maybe, or China itself or Asia itself is not the number one foreign policy. There's still really hard and important work that needs to be done with this field. There's so many more rocks that are yet to be unturned. So I just wouldn't be deterred by that. And when you mentioned inflection points, it reminded me of that.
Well, that's great, Rachael. And thank you, Greyson, for your ringing endorsement of language and culture and understanding. So we do have what I like to call a Chinese panel with lots of very impressive participants here tonight. So I'll ask panelists going forward, just keep your comments within a minute or so, just a short, brief, but to the point. So the next question I have for you, and I'm going to start with Aaron on this one, is what was the defining moment that made you decide to pursue a career in U.S.-China relations?
Yeah, hard to pinpoint one because for some background on me, both of my parents immigrated to the U.S. From Asia when they were teenagers. So my Chinese side of my family was displaced from Shanghai during the Communist Revolution. And the Korean side of my family was displaced internally and then to the United States during the Korean War, which also China was involved in. So China's always been a part of my life. It's been this kind of shadow hanging over me, but also been something of phenomenal interest. And what spurred me to kind of be interested in the China field was at the time, China's BRI involvement in Africa was a relatively new thing. And I saw it as kind of this could be a status quo changer or paradigm shifter in terms of U.S. soft power and in terms of how financial and developmental relationships are shaped in the global sphere. And that's kind of the moment I decided for myself that would be something that I would continue to follow and continue to be of interest to me.
So I guess for me, it's because when I came to Georgetown and joining the security studies program, I found that China is mentioned every single class, and sometimes some comments probably more biased and not really based on the facts. So that kind of pushed me to try to bring more nuances and bridge the gap here.
I had the great fortune in high school of spending several summers at the International Trade Commission in their Office of Economics. And I knew at the time that I wanted to study economics. It wasn't until those summers working there, which well before the trade war, this was starting in 08, it was still all China all the time, understanding the impact of letting China into WTO. And so I remember I was telling Greyson right before this started, at the time, some of the questionnaires that we would send to industry for import injury investigations, companies were still filing by hand. And so as a lowly intern, I, among other responsibilities, had the task of manually typing some of these responses, which in hindsight, I'm grateful for, because I can tell you, I know the ins and outs of Section 301 investigations as a result of it. And so it really ballooned from there. I think like many, you get hooked by the opacity, the enormity, and the importance of understanding China for our country, in the sense that even as an intern, getting to contribute to some of those reports for Senate Finance or House Ways and Means, that you were making a difference.
So for me, the defining moment, I can still remember it like it was yesterday. And it was back in high school, where I had a 7-foot-tall classmate from Sudan dunk on me during a basketball practice and knock me out. And when I came to, I was like, what's going on? He was looking and standing over me. And, I don't know exactly what he probably intended, but I know how I took it. He said, why are you wasting your time? he could have meant, why was I wasting my time as a 6-foot guy trying to block him on the basketball court? But, how I took it is, why am I wasting my time trying to go to the NBA when really, there is better things I should do with my time? And that was what inspired me to start learning languages, to start learning other skills such as debate, to where that built up the soft skills that are important in the U.S. China field. And it was, that defining moment that made me say, I really need to find out what my purpose, what my passions, and where my true skills lie. So, I would take it back to that day. I still have the pain of getting dunked on back then. I can't dunk anymore as a 33-year-old now. So I would say enjoy your youth while you can too. Listen to what the world is telling you. If you're not 7 feet tall, maybe don't pursue the NBA at this point in time. And continue to develop all those skills that are unique to you. And if it's language, if it's finance, if it's math, if it's engineering, all of that can be applied to the U.S. China field. If there is anybody in here who does want to pursue the MBA, let me know. I'll give you some tips. Don't get dunked on.
So my defining moment was I had my next door neighbor worked with the Army, and he put me in touch with someone, and I wish I remembered who this man's name was, but we had a coffee, I think probably my junior year of high school. And at the time, I thought I wanted to do counterterrorism. I thought I was going to go to college and learn Arabic and do international relations. And I thought I was going to kick terrorists butt in Afghanistan. And so I was talking to this person who worked in DC for some time, and he kind of looked at me and he was like, you grew up in Asia, you speak Mandarin. He was like, China is going to kind of be the sort of next question, or it's going to be a forward issue that maybe you should do that route instead of learning Farsi or something. And so I was like, that makes a lot of sense. And I took his advice, and I just continued to run with it. But I think at the core of it, I always wanted to work on something. My interest in going into international relations stemmed from 9/11. It really stemmed from this passion of wanting to, how could I help my country avert war? How could I help inform decisions to make sure war doesn't happen? And that's really kind of has always been my North Star, as you said, but just has materialized in many different ways. But sometimes a stranger can really pivot you in ways you don't expect.
Well, those are all fascinating ways to get started in this work. So next, and we'll start with Jie on this one. If you could go back to your younger self, what advice would you give in terms of preparing for a career, and how would you communicate that to others?
Yeah, I would say two things. First is try to publish even if you're going to get rejected. So my college advisor she kept telling me that you need to try publishing your class essays. So I was not really confident at that moment. And later on, turns out actually the bar may not be that high, so long as you have a clear arguments, strong evidence, and writing fluent English. And I think you can start small from some school outlets. I'm sure George Washington also have their platform, like Georgetown. And the second thing is what I said before, coffee chess, because I had no idea what that was back in college. And I just didn't realize how quickly and effective it can be to help you build your network and also get the information that will just save you a lot of time.
So by the time I graduated from high school, I knew I wanted China to be a part of my career. You talk about inflection points. We fast forward then to 4 years. I'm graduating undergrad, and I'm facing a decision, which led me to McKinsey, where for most of that time, I was not working on issues related to China. And I look back on that, and what I was doing was making a bet informed, I think, by one fundamental reality. I was a first-gen college kid, presented with the opportunity to make more money my first year out of college than my parents had in their entire lives working. I had the opportunity to get sponsorship for an MBA, and it just seemed so much more of the sure bet. And so the challenge that I set for myself was, how do I grasp for the career stability and still find a way to work towards the North Star of something related to China? And so for me, what that, turned out in practice was just finding ways to stay on the periphery, right? You went back to Schwartzman. When I was doing my MBA, I worked on an Asia Society report on China's influence operations in the U.S. and got to meet lots of the distinguished scholars in the field. Came back to Washington, would sneak out of work and go to CFR events or go to other events around town and network. And join a campaign on one of their advisory staffs. And so just enough to stay on the periphery that when this opportunity came, I was able to be a part of the consideration set and able to take it. And I would tell myself, you made the right bet.
I would say one thing as we think about advice to one's younger self, and there's a phrase which is that everybody's hindsight CEO, which is where when you look back in hindsight, you're like, oh, I would have made that decision. And while you'll never be able to predict exactly what's going to happen in the future, what I would go back and tell my younger self, in addition to everything that the other panelists have already said, is to try and think about how things will be more in the future. I think when I was just starting off my career and even doing things, I was very much in the present. I want to be in China. I want to do, this job, but I wasn't thinking about how those jobs would change in the future. Nobody could have predicted some of the job market stuff that you all are getting ready to see as it relates to AI and how technology is changing the future of work. But you do have to try. You have to really ask yourself what that's going to be, what changes could happen in the future. And from that, maybe it would have led me to take a STEM route in addition to what I was doing with the Chinese language, or, just that hindsight. If I was looking forward, I would have seen how important some of those other hard skills would be. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about hard skills and how important they are, or also just how they fit into the overall ecosystem. It's tough to say what's more important than one thing or another. But I would say, try and predict a little bit more how the market is going to change. And that's something that I'd say you can apply to your career, but also your work as you start, going through your career, and even as you make decisions every day. Really try and look into how things will be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line as best as you can.
I'll kind of focus on the part of the question that was like, what could better prepare you for your career today? And this is something that I think I thought a lot about when I went into grad school at SSP, where it was like, do I want to continue doing something that's regionally focused, or do I want to maybe try and branch out and do something that's more functional? But as I've gone through my career, pretty focused on like what China is doing, I find that when you get to the question of, well, what do you do about it? It requires an understanding of what does the United States, what's the United States policy? What can the United States do? What is the U.S. military doing? And so I think something that would better prepare me for my career today is just having an understanding of how did U.S. policy on X issue develop, and what were the inputs of decision making that went into our own organizational structure thinking when it comes to either the White House or the Department of State or Defense. How did the United States come to make those decisions that continue to impact today? Because I think it's easy to kind of fall into one path of explaining like a challenge, which maybe there's a China challenge on X. But then when you get to the flip side of like, okay, well, what should the United States do about that challenge, of having a better understanding of how our government operates and how our industries operate, and the intersection of that with our policies is really important. And so I think that would make me an even better analyst today.
Wow, tough question to be the last person on here. I would say for myself, the best advice that I would give is know what's out there. And I think it's easy to think, oh, okay, just a quick Google search of what's available in terms of, can I do CLS or Boren or Fulbright or something like that. But what I really mean is be aggressive and be intentional with your research. For instance, when I was working for Susie Lee's office, she had me sign thank you letter or congratulatory letters to high school students who participated in the State Department internship to foreign embassies. And I was like, we have something like this? And she's like, yeah, we send 30 to 50 young Nevadans every year to embassies all over the world where they take a summer internship. And I was like, wow, I'm 25 and I'm just finding out about this. And I went to one of the better schools in Las Vegas, which tells you it's not just about in terms of like where the funding for the schools is, but I think is particularly for international relations, particularly for U.S. China, there is the highest barrier of entry is communication and knowing what's out there. And that's what I mean by being like really interrogating the seat that you want next, is not just doing the basic research of, I want to go in this general direction. I did that initially when I first came to DC. I thought, okay, I want to do the, that means I'll do GW for 2 years and then I'll do FSO, and then I'll be on my way and have a great 40-year career at the State Department and, you know, die happy as an ambassador somewhere. But for people who are in DC, you know, you can see it on LinkedIn, you can see it on Indeed or whatever. Everybody's got, you know, there's a wide plethora of people who do international relations work. Treasury has an international relations department. Commerce does, IS. The Smithsonian has an international. I even saw a LinkedIn ad one time for McDonald's. They had an international affairs officer. And I was like, there's a mixed service out there that you could join if you are open to the possibilities. So don't limit yourself. Really, truly understand what is out there, because most likely people will not be looking as hard as you are if you really put yourself to task. And there is a wide amount of, as limited as opportunities feel right now in the job market, I think there is an endless amount of possibility out there for people if they just have the courage to go and find it.
Well, that's great career advice from all of you, and nice to hear what you would tell your younger selves. So I'm going to ask one more long-form question, then we'll do some short, pithy ones and open it up to the audience. Mentorship, as we know, is very important in this field. So who has been the biggest influence or mentor during your career, and how do you try and emulate that influence for the next generation? And we're going to start with Kyle on this one.
Been blessed to have many mentors. Mentorship comes in lots of forms. I think sometimes some of the most helpful have been the folks that are just 2 or 3 years ahead of you, who can give you the very tactical brass tacks about what's around the corner. But, you know, one of the most consequential is, you know, the first time in your life when you have somebody who isn't a family member who sees more in you than you do in yourself. That's special, and that's something that you hold with you. And for me, that's a man named Charlie Ellis, who flew up to Connecticut last weekend to spend time with. I'm very fortunate to have an incredible boss in Paul Hanley right now. I know many of you know him in the audience. I know some folks on the panel know him as well. And he is just so insistent on in bringing you into the room. Incredibly transparent, creating opportunities just as flat of a hierarchy as you can imagine, and creating that ethos that your opinions and viewpoints matter. And that was something that I tried to emulate, you know, when I was at McKinsey, and certainly try to pay forward now.
Sounds good. You know, it's really tough to make a decision of just one. So I'm going to do very quickly 4 different people who have influenced me and why. So the 4 people are Peter Chang. He's a famous Chinese chef here in DC. Second person would be LeBron James. Third person would be Obama. Fourth person would be my grandfather. Now I'll let you all decide which ones I know and I don't know. Starting with Peter Chang, what I've learned from him is always put your heart into things. He puts his heart into every meal. So if you get a chance to go to Q or Chang, you're going to feel that authenticism, and you're going to feel that he really cares about every dish. I'm the official hype man for Peter Chang, by the way. You know, LeBron James, you learn about hard work. And, you know, how he's been able to always push through things for 21 plus years now. So that's an important lesson to learn, and what I would just want to, you know, share to the next generation. Third person, Obama, pragmatism. You have to be pragmatic and make decisions based off of the information that you have at the time. And final person, favorite person on the list is my grandfather, who said, always use, and, you know, I apologize for the religious reference here, but he says, always use your God-given talents. He told me to always never forget the Chinese language, never drop music and your passion for that, and always keep swimming. So, you know, with those things, stay in shape, you know, keep the arts and also keep the language. But each of those influencers in my life have, you know, made sure that I remember how to keep pushing and, you know, how to do that right.
That was really eloquent. I think one person that certainly that comes to mind is Randy Shriver, who has really like had just been like a great, not just mentor and like leader, but a really good friend. I think in a similar ways to Paul Hanley, and the two of them work very closely together. It's just always bringing people to the table, and I think making sure that or they give everyone a feeling like they want to be in a room where like others are smarter, listening to other people's, like you're not the smartest person in the room, even though frankly he is, if he's listening to this. But yeah, so I think a lot of what I emulate from him is how do you show leadership? How do you empower others around you? How do you bring others to the table? But also I think in just impressing upon the fact that there's always something new to learn, that you could always learn from others younger or older than you. And then to always never be afraid to like speak up and to give others the opportunity to speak up because that they have something important to say. And I think, because you said 4 people, so I'll do 2. But I think another one is just a very good friend of mine who works at State Department. She has been in my life since 2011. We met in study abroad in Beijing together. And so it's incredible that we're both here in DC working in the jobs that we are. She was in my wedding party, and I think she's just someone who reminds me that like I don't have like don't be an imposter, that you do have skill sets, that you can go out there and be confident and know what you know. And so I think just seeing a peer in the field really go out there and own their topic set and be confident, and just really admire her for that. So.
Yeah, I'll say the person who I most attribute to where I'm at right now is the person who gave me the opportunity to be here. Her name is Rachael Burton, and she was congressional liaison to the EPA in the Biden-Harris administration. And as a first-generation student myself, first time in DC, was moving here for grad school, no network, no support, and I just helped her out with a couple of things at the office, helped her kind of get set up in a quiet space, and asked her, I've never even thought about working in the White House. What does that entail? And taking the time to get to know me, get to know my story, and say, I think you have a shot at this. I believe in you, and I think you can actually do some good, and you have a great story. And taking a chance. A lot of people don't realize how lucky people are to just have somebody take a chance on them. And I'll follow that up and say, my current boss, Mira Rapp Hooper, inspires me every day to be better and to kind of challenge myself to be more informative, to be more analytical, to just raise my professionalism to the next level. But I will say, I was happy to hear the YPFP shout out because I'm here as the managing director of YPFP. We also need to be, as young professionals, mentors for each other. I think in this day and age, it's great to have a mentor a couple years ahead of you or a more senior one, but just to share information, to share, you saw a job posting that maybe isn't for you, but you have somebody in mind that you think, hey, I think you should really go for this. Do you mind if I connect you or just reach out? And I think that's one of the wonderful things about DC is everyone kind of realizes we're all in the same ship, even if we're competing against each other in the same industry or looking for the same jobs. So take some time, build your network, and really be a mentor to one another, I think is the most important thing.
I'll try to be quick. I would say one of the most helpful mentor for me is one of my former boss who really was the first private consulting company I interned at after graduating from undergrad, because I really had no idea of the pragmatism in the real world. So it's a lot of political theories I got from the school, but when you came to like Chinese politics, he really taught me how to read between the lines and like go behind the headlines and know about the context of the policy announcement. So I guess, being able to read the regional text and understand the overall political environment is one kind of important takeaway I got.
Great. And Aaron, I would say that Greyson said that he advanced his career by not going to a YPFP event, but we won't take that away from Aaron.
With the chief of staff for Michelle Obama, so I'll take that. I'll take that any day.
No, it's great. And I've also learned a lot about culinary diplomacy. So clearly we have careers in McDonald's and with Peter Chang and others that we can pursue. But moving on, so we're getting to the end of me asking questions, and we'll turn it over to the audience. But just a couple yes or no questions for you. So given the geopolitical situation today and security concerns that are out there, do you still recommend that students today study abroad and work in China? So we're going to start with Greyson and just go down.
I would say yes, because you want to expand your horizons. You want to see different ideas, understand, regardless of where you stand on the ideological side of the foreign affairs and security debate, you want to be able to have the most pertinent, most relevant knowledge you can. And the only way you can do that is by being there.
That's great, but we just want one word.
Yes.
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 I am studying abroad here.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's great. Second yes or no question, and we're going to start with Rachael on this one. Has this challenging job market for foreign affairs professionals made you advise others to pursue different career paths?
No.
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 And so finally, before we open up to audience questions, a couple of one word or very, very short answers. So if you could go back to school now and pursue a degree, what would it be? And we'll start with Rachael on this one.
I think if I can go back to SSP and pick a core concentration, I would have done military operations.
If I could do it all over again, I would do the same degree, but just not during COVID this time.
I would say a STEM major.
Still economics.
I would probably go back and add the STEM major.
So there's also been kind of a growing sense that quantitative skills are more important than the qualitative skills in universities and the way we design our curricula and things like that. Obviously, all of you just said most of you said you wanted to go back and do STEM, right? But if you had to choose between hiring someone with very strong qualitative skills or strong quantitative skills, which do you think would be the most important to you? And Greyson, we'll start with you.
It's always tough sometimes trying to find I'll make this quick, trying to find the right fit. So, you still hear me? I'll just talk loud. But I would say it's about the job. So you'll see jobs that will require the qualitative and you'll see jobs that would require the quantitative. And when we're hiring at the U.S. China Business Council, it's usually a little combination of the both. So it's tough to make a decision one or the other. It depends on the job. I would say as best as you can, develop skills in both.
Structured problem solving trumps all, especially now you can vibe code your way through statistical analysis and R or whatever else you need to do.
I would say qualitative because my work doesn't use data that much.
I would also say it depends if you're going for ArcGIS or an R-related job. Obviously, you want those quant skills. I'll say they're more important now, especially in Congress and policy decision-making spaces. We want smarter, better decisions, and that's data-driven. But it'll always trump doing and knowing how to interrogate a question and solving it.
This is a debate I have with my husband very often, actually. I always land on qualitative because communication matters. Like numbers lie all the time is what I say. What are the inputs that go into the numbers matter? And so if you can't communicate what the question is or what the problem is, then you can't communicate how to solve it. And you also can't interrogate why those numbers show what they show. So I would say qualitative.
Okay, and last one of these. So we're going to start with you, Rachael. Which skill do you think is the most important skill for people who want to advance in the U.S.-China relations field to know?
Writing. I think writing and your research prowess, and it's not just like, oh, I can do research in the Chinese language or something, but like being able to show to develop your methodology and your process for it. The problem framing is really important because that dictates how you're going to try and solve that problem or research into that. But again, writing and communication is really important. If you can't get something across in an accurate or pithy or concise way, you're going to lose your audience.
Yeah, I'll second that. I think communication is the most key. You could be the smartest person in the world with the best research, but if you can't tell me why it matters, then I'm not going to be able to make any actionable items or deliverables off of that.
I would say research skill, especially the ability to find the primary sources instead of like simply quoting others' words.
Empathy, a willingness to understand the other side.
Sounds like we're saying that the soft skills are actually more important than the qualitative. I would just add to that the real soft skill here is tough to say, but being able to present, so presentation, being able to, like they said, pithy, being able to get people to find it interesting is very important. So communication, I would just double down on that.
Right. And I think with the advancement of AI, I think these are things that don't come naturally, whether it's empathy or good writing skills or things. And, you can't trust AI to do any of those things well yet. So good endorsements for not always relying on AI. So we're going to open it up to the audience. We have time for a couple questions. So we'll start with you. Please just tell us your name, where you're from, and offer your question.
Hi, my name is Maxine. I'm from Rochester, New York, but I live and work in Maryland. How would you guys compare the new generation of China experts compared to the old generation of China experts from 20, 30 years ago? As I've kind of heard that many China, kind of the old generation of experts didn't have either very good skills or extensive living in. So, yeah.
So we'll take it.
I can take a first stab at it, Maxine. Thank you for the question, because I think it's a really good one. I think the major difference is the amount of information and like technology. I think to Jie Gao's point, like being able to, like the primary sources that are out there and the ability to like think about looking through these like substacks of Chinese defense master's thesis that have been provided. I think there's a lot of different ways and avenues to like find open source information that, and then like because of the platforms that we have today, there's a lot more that can be written about. And I think the older generation was maybe more confined. Confined is the wrong word, perhaps, but I think they had a lot more access and a lot more people that they can talk to. I think within China, and I think developing those types of like relationships back then was more available than I think it is today. But we have a lot more online information, open source information that we have access to today. So like I think using data sets that your people are building or satellite imagery, like things like that are more prevalent today than before.
Does anyone else want to take that? Okay. Next. Oh, okay.
Quick thing is I'll say all generations of China hands are great. The old generation was arguably the vanguard at the beginning of opening up. The current generation, I'd say we're the best too. If we're going to just like put ourselves out there, we have language skills, we have in-country experience, but that was built on top of folks who came before us. So if we're talking about the debate here, everybody had something that they brought to the table, and hopefully we can set a great future for the rest of you all in the room.
Great. So I see two of you over here. We're going to take both of you. Yes, and the lady in the white next to her.
Hi, my name is Sean. Okay. Hi, my name is Allison. I'm interested to hear where you guys see the future of U.S. China relations going forward. Like what aspects of it you think are going to require more expertise and demand for young professionals?
And we'll take the next.
Hi, my name is Darren, and Hi, my name is.
That's fine. So my name is Darren, and I'm a master's student at Allison, and I was curious about your insights regarding maybe secondary countries of interest as well that are connected to China. So, for example, maybe Vietnam, Thailand, or Cambodia, or Myanmar that you think might be worth also taking a look at concurrently this time.
Great, and we'll take the question. Yes.
So,
my name is Chris Seifert. I'm from Denver. I'm currently studying at Hopkins SAIS as a international relations student. So I appreciate George Washington opening this up to everybody. My question is, when you're conducting research or choosing an area to develop your own subject matter or regional expertise in, what steps do you take to remove your own, say, confirmation bias from your search when in terms of like, say, hey, I might know more about this area, or therefore I might see more potential in it as a research topic. How do you sort of step back from that and take an objective view of what's available?
Those three questions, you're welcome to take any of them. So who wants to start us off?
I can jump in first. On the second countries question, this is actually an entire focus of a major effort we're doing right now at JPMorgan, is understanding U.S. China spillovers on third countries. And we would say that U.S. China is probably a top 3 issue for our Asian colleagues and clients. It's a top 5 issue for our EMEA colleagues and clients, and it's a top 10 issue for our clients in the Americas. And so I wouldn't limit yourself necessarily even to the region. To the confirmation bias, I think one of the things I'm most grateful for the Schwartzman piece to counter the confirmation bias is getting to live in close proximity with peers, party members, grew up in their system, believe strongly in their system, and yet have very different views. I can't tell you how many times a day I have a mental model of several of them in my head that I'm working through. How would John Kaidi think about this? How would, Jie Gao think about this? That helps me work through that.
I'll take the first one. Because I work in the foreign policy and defense realm, I would say the space is definitely a next biggest area for China-US competition, and also hopefully cooperation as well. So yeah, space warfare or commercial space is all like a trending topic these days.
I'll try and take all 3 if that's okay. The first one I would say is while we can, in DC, we're in the bubble, right? We kind of get bogged down with great power competition, all that sort of thing. But if we think back to not even more than 10 years ago, we worked together on anti-piracy operations on the east coast of Africa with China. We worked together on global health. And so there are areas of competition, but there are also areas of strategic alignment. I think technology will also be one of those. Enforcement of crypto crimes and financial crimes through that will be another one, and space. In terms of other countries to focus on, I think ASEAN and Southeast Asia will be tremendously important in terms of how we see the neutrality alignment between the ASEAN countries, between US and China as they kind of start to combat more over influence in the region. I think things like SMR technologies for nuclear, for particularly Malaysia, Singapore, that sort of thing. And as you're seeing with the tariffs now, arbitration between different tariff rates for different countries will mean a lot for American manufacturers here in a little bit. And then confirmation bias, kind of what he said, just always challenge your assumptions. If you think that you're getting too many of the same opinions, maybe think of another universe of people who might have maybe a similar or differing opinion to yours and ask them about it. And just, I think a lot of this is based off of human to human connection and exploring what it means to see from the other side of your mirror and turning it around to be a lens to see the other side with.
Free to go next. I think for Allison, your question on the future of U.S.-China relations. Well, one, I'm glad everyone's saying space, because a plug for the U.S.-China Economic and Security Review Commission is that we're covering space this year and commercial space. So hopefully that will glean some additional research topics down the road. But our annual report comes out in November. Plug. But I think some issues that come to mind for me are I think supply chain continues to be something that it's really challenging. It's really hard to get past second, third order effects. I think that's just a question that you will find in both government and industry, as well as any type of emerging technology like biotechnology. And I think quantum is a lot of more leading edge emerging tech issues. Is it Daryl? Is that right? Darren. I think for me, I think a lot about how does China impact U.S. alliances. So I think to the extent that I think about secondary countries of interest, and again, the commission always kind of takes a different look at China in X. So this past year we looked at Southeast Asia, this year we're looking at Southeast Asia and Pacific Islands, for example. But something I always think about is how is China impacting our alliances or our partners? And then I think that's always an interesting area. How might that affect U.S. policy in the future? And then Chris, for your question on research, one thing I think about for confirmation bias is one, make sure you understand the spectrum of the problem. And I don't mean left or right political views, but what is the realm of the debate? And then what are the major ideas for that realm? If you don't understand a spectrum, then you are going to have confirmation bias. And my second thing is, I always say this, but one of the first things I do when I see a paper is the first thing I do is I actually go and I look at the citations. Who are they citing? Who are they footnoting? And that will make it apparent if there's a confirmation bias. And so I think if you do that with your own work, if you can see if you're citing a certain person or a certain resource, or are you using primary sources or not, I think that will reflect the confirmation bias that the argument is showing. And so that's a really easy and quick way of kind of making sure that that spectrum exists.
And I'll just sort of jump in. I'll start with the confirmation bias question because I think it sort of leads to the answer to what the future looks like. To really, get around that confirmation bias, I would say you have to, really read research that's different from the work that you do and your own research. So, for instance, for the council, we get really focused on the nitty gritty of business operations, deal making. How do we create an environment for that? But we need to research what's happening on the defense end, because in the end, that could actually shoot in the foot the deal that you might be trying to make or the policy that you're trying to influence on the business side. So we need to always understand what's happening on the various spectrums of U.S. China relations to, get around that confirmation bias of when you're really focused on just that one aspect of what you're doing. And I think that really gets to the future and what we could see, which is that uncertainty. When we're talking the future, at least the next 4 years, this uncertainty, because while we're expecting a leaders meeting as soon as next week, no guarantees on that. Even if a deal is made, then what are some of those things that could be done to escalate? For instance, we're seeing Commerce putting out some relatively restrictive policies guiding some of the trade policy from less of a deal-making perspective in recent weeks. How does what happens in the various parts, again, of U.S.-China relations affect that uncertainty that we have been seeing lately and that will likely continue through the near future?
Well, those were great questions. And unfortunately, we have to leave it there just in terms of time. But I will say it would take more panels to address all of those questions. And you're in luck because next month, our next China Connections event will be on the topic of the future of U.S.-China relations. And we'll have Mark Lambert, who's most recently with the State Department, in conversation with New York Times journalist Ed Wong. So I hope you join us on November 18th at 10 a.m. for that one. I also want to make a plug for an event we'll be doing in New York. If you happen to be there on November 11th, Veterans Day, we're having Asian American author Gish Jin in conversation with Qian Julie Wang. So that's part of our Asian American author series. And finally, I'll say that our internships are open now, as I'm sure my colleagues and their organizations are also advertising their internships. So feel free, as you know, to talk to any of us about career opportunities in the field generally or at our respective organizations. And we hope to see you there. I now invite everyone to a reception outside in our graduate student lounge area. And thank you all for being here tonight. And thank this incredible group of panelists for joining us.
Bye.